Fans Forum. We got questions, answers, opinions. Let's see what the people on our live stream have got to say. Where do you want to take us?
Okay, let's start here with John. He says, if Soto would agree to an extension with the Padres, I think it would energize the clubhouse. Saw how players holding out for free agency really messed up the Nationals clubhouse.
The only thing you need to know, any conversation that involves Juan Soto and the San Diego Padres, is Scott Boras. Boras is going to take this client on the open market November 1 after next season, after 2024. And then the Padres will try to bid if they still retain him, or maybe they trade him before that point in time if this thing comes off the tracks. But because of that guy, Scott Boras, John, I don't think there's any deal coming. Boras wants to take this next client to $50 million, although it appears to me Ohtani is going to be the first one that's going to get to the magic $50 million mark.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are wondering, how valuable is Soto? I mean, is he 440 million, valuable? Is he 600 million? I mean, obviously Ohtani's a layer up from that, but we've just seen enough of him. We realize his defense isn't what it should be. A lot of times he's looking for the walk rather than looking to drive the ball. So you're like, well, what is his value? Maybe he passed up the best deal he was going to get in Washington.
Could well be. He's represented by Scott Boras, who's going to try to get him the mega deal. Only time will tell, but that's why there is no deal right now, and probably won't be a deal because that name is going to take that player on the open market. Next question.
Next question here. This is from Emmanuel. He says, talking about the Pac-12, does the Pac-12 network continue, or does it become part of a streaming service?
Yeah, I think it evaporates, and I think based on what I've been able to piecemeal together, there will be an on-live presence. I don't know whether it's going to be Disney and ESPN or ABC. There will be a live TV network presence. Now we're led to believe there might be a second network, which might be the CW, which is now diving into professional sports. Then there will be a streaming service, and I'm not sure if that's Apple or who that is, but there could be as many as 3 different partnerships to watch these games, see these games, etc. And I think that's why it's taken so long, because you got the cord cutting problem with cable. You've got obviously the advertising economic issue, which is impacting who's bidding and how much they're bidding. And now all of a sudden, these late gamers have jumped in here and want to be part of it, or come up with a piece of the pie. So I would think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to get definition of how that structure looks with the Pac-12 conference. And the Pac-12 network was a disaster. Larry Scott goes off in the sunset, got a big payday, burned it through an awful lot of money, leading the Pac-12, created the Pac-12 network, and then they never, ever got the kind of distribution that they needed, which I think really hurt the conference a great deal.
It's just interesting how, all these conferences are built. I mean, if you were to blow up the whole model, how would you rebuild it? Would you just make them regional conferences, or would you have them as tiers, like SEC 1, Big Ten 2? I mean, what's your angle on the right way to do it?
The money's driving everything. So no, nothing's going to change. Mm-hmm. They're not going to restructure so they take less money.
Of course not.
I mean, and each of these conferences thinks that they're a power player. Southeastern Conference and Pac-10, Big 12, Big 10, ACC is kind of hanging on for life. But those are the power guys, and there's nothing going to change that. There's not going to be any structure there. The group of 5 guys, and we'll talk more about this, to be an AD in a group of 5 school right now, I think is really, really hard because of the economics that are going on in the world of sports. We move on,
and this is from Manny, and he says, who's the team leader or team captain for the Padres? I know the Dodgers have 2, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman.
I think that's a problem because I don't think the Padres have one. I'm not going to be cruel and say there's a bunch of independent contractors in this clubhouse, but I just don't think that the Padres have that type of leadership. I mean, the ace of your pitching staff, Yu Darvish, does not speak English. I mean, he's a great pro. My goodness, what a nice career. Joe Musgrove might well be, but pitchers normally are not the leaders in the clubhouse. Blake Snell is just a really different persona, so he's not a leader. Maybe Tatis becomes that leader. I don't sense Machado is that leader. I think Machado is just a great individual player, and he might be a future Hall of Famer. And I just don't know where Soto is in terms of being a complete package guy. And every time we talk about Soto, it's always about dollars. It's about the contract, or where does he fit? Will he be traded? Manny, you raise a great point. I think it's a leaderless team, and I think maybe indirectly that's a bit of an issue.
Now, I think Manny is growing into the role. I mean, when he was a punk in Baltimore, he was not a leader, but he's matured, and I'm seeing some aspects of that, just how he conducts business while he's in the dugout. But Musgrove clearly is a leader in that clubhouse on the pitching side. But he made some interesting comments. He said, we'd still be a good team if we didn't have Blake Snell or Josh Hader. What'd you think about that?
I don't buy that, because you would be down two of your marquee pitchers. Who are you going to replace them with?
Yeah.
Who do you think at El Paso? Who do you think at San Antonio you're going to replace him with?
I'm just surprised he said it out loud.
Well, he speaks his mind. That's okay. No problem there. I think he's obviously protective of everything that's in that clubhouse downstairs at Petco Park, but he is a leader, but sometimes it's tough for pitchers, quote pitchers, to actually be leaders of the rest of the everyday roster. We move on. So let's get some of our social media commenters in here, and we'll start with some Clippers talk. How about that? And this is from Peter C51 on Instagram. He says, as a fan of Kawhi, he once had the league in his hands. Now he can't even play half a season. Paul George hasn't been the same since his Oklahoma City days. Rebuild, get what you can now before it's too late. Well, there's two ways to look at it. You're so really close if you could keep Kawhi and PG on the floor, that if you make the deal to get James Harden and some of the young kids that you have played that have shown flashes take the next step up, you're really close. But are you close to the point you're going to give max contracts to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? We talked about that last week. The max contract is 4 years, $220. They're not taking anything less. And if you don't give it to them, then it's a signal they're going to leave at the end of this coming season. So the Clippers are really at a tough crossroads as to what do they do? Do they trade what they have left to try to get Harden and that becomes the big three and that works? Or do you give up just because of the bad injury history between Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? Tough call for Steve Ballmer, really tough call. But to me, they are so close. I would just try to keep it together and go one more time. And if they break down again this year, let them walk, let them opt out, and then you get into total rebuild mode. Right. If you trade them, I don't think you're going to get superstar, quote, value back in the package that's delivered to your front door because of their injury history. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think given that when they're both on the court at the same time, the team is spectacular. So they just got to hope that those guys will stay healthy. I mean, they can't really do anything else. Like you said, if they traded away, PG-13 or Kawhi, they might get some young guys, but they're not going to be, a championship level team. That's going to still be putting it off years down the road. So I think you got to stick with it and hope the stars align.
On we go. Social media sounding off here on our fans forum. Where do you want to go, John?
Okay, let's talk a little Oakland A's. This is from Sergio Fernandez. He says, all the money in the East Bay is on the other side of the mountain, Danville, San Ramon, then up the 680 freeway to Dublin and Pleasanton. That's where the A's should have built the stadium to rep the East Bay. No way in hell are any of those people driving to Oakland for a night game to get their car windows smashed or to get held up by one of the locals for their watches or wallets in 2023.
Ooh, that's pretty nasty stuff about the citizens of Oakland. Understand that at one point it looked like they were headed to San Jose, which is a market unto itself. And then there was obviously talk about Sacramento, the state capital. And Major League Baseball let his San Francisco Giants, he's the one that's got the Giants cap in his man cave. His Giants blocked any effort for the Oakland Athletics to move anywhere to get a stadium constructed. So they're gone. I don't think they're ever coming back. I don't think Oakland's going to get a franchise back. And Oakland, I hate to say, is a dying, decayed city. But obviously their economics don't work anymore, and they've lost all their franchises. The NFL has vacated, the NBA has vacated. They lost the NHL team way back in the day, and now baseball has exited. So San Francisco's Giants, his team will own the market.
Yeah, well, even in the East Bay, one of the social media commenters was talking about how Golden Gate Fields, the racetrack is closing as well. So yeah, just a lot of chaos, but it's still surprising that they can't make it work on the East Bay because there's still a lot of money there. It's just the stars haven't aligned there at all.
Exactly. On we go.
On we go. Let's talk about this is a kind of a harsh take here, but I want to get it out there. This is from Daniel Caseta talking about Christian Pulisic. And he says, nothing is worse than listening to an American that hasn't watched Chelsea's games throw in his, quote, insight. Plenty of injuries, no consistencies, too many chances, very fragile, and more worries about his social media than his fitness. Thanks for your service, but stop the drama.
Oh, he must not like anything you said about Chelsea. Couldn't be talking about me. I mentioned all those things about availability, about nagging injuries, about persona. You didn't mention Thomas Tuchel, the coach, who Christian Pulisic had kind of a real edgy relationship. Old school European coach versus young American trying to learn on the job. So be it, it didn't work. Chelsea has removed itself from a whole pile of good players. I don't know what their side is going to be like going forward. I am surprised that Pulisic exited EPL, that he's gone to AC Milan, because as great as Milan has been, as great as FC Barcelona or Real Madrid has been in Spain, the league collectively is not on the same radar as the English Premier League. I thought somebody else would make a run at him, but maybe the dollars didn't fit, or maybe at the end of the day, Chelsea said, oh, he could play, but he's not going to play in our league against us. So it just didn't work. The nagging injuries, I think, have been the issue that has really retarded his development. But yet he's come back stateside, and when he's played for Team USA, and he's been fairly healthy during the stretch run they had with Berhalter in the last World Cup, and obviously this lead up to 2026. The kid he's not a kid anymore. He has grown into a man, grown into a leader, good player. Now, is he Harry Kane? Nah, I don't think so. I mean, Harry Kane's a phenomenal sniper in the English Premier League, but we'll see. He's still got an awful lot in front of him at age 24. So I am surprised didn't work out better, but he never was able to stay on the pitch on a consistent basis with injuries.
Yeah, that's a tough break for the kid. But, when is Pulisic and all the other stars going to return to the men's national team? Because we just saw the Gold Cup. They had their B team in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all part of an international schedule in which the leagues allow their players to go play for their national side. So, again, 2026 is a little bit away here. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for Team USA to continue to grow and come together. I am so amped about U.S. soccer because of the next wave of young guns. I mean, I am a Pulisic fan, but boy, when you see all the young guys that they just played in the Nations League tournament, now the Gold Cup roster was another group of young guys. You see all the guys that played in the Nations League, and you add them to what they've got right now with Pulisic and Weston McKennie, they're going to have some snipers along the way. I think they've built this thing really well, and we're still 2.5 years out before we get to 2026.
Yeah, I'm fired up too for the men's, but really the women, they're on the stage right now. So
you're not offended that Chelsea guy was ripping you, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a couple more here on social media. Sound off.
All right, this is from Ryan, and he's talking about the robo-ump here. The ABS challenge system currently being used in the International League is great. Each team gets 3 challenges on balls and strikes, but only the pitcher, catcher, or batter may challenge. If the challenge proves the ump got the call wrong, the team keeps the challenge. Awesome system.
It's an interesting structure, but again, Rob Manfred this past week just kind of put it to bed. Said we're not going to consider robo-ump going forward in 2024. Now, there may be some glitches. Maybe technically it's just not a perfect system yet. But with technology, I think you can solve, whether it's camera angles, number of cameras, location, you can solve that if you really want to do it. But I tell you, the umpiring in baseball, I think, is hideous. The last 3 years, I wrote a column about this a couple days ago on my website, which you need to check. I wrote a column that years ago, about 5 to 7 years ago, the American and National League had separate umpires, and baseball interceded, dissolved that. All the umpires went into one pool. Now you work games anywhere and everywhere. And they restructured the strike zone, and then they put a rating system in for all these guys calling balls and strikes. And it could be pretty harsh if you were a screw up. And we had a group of years in which there was consistency, and that's all anybody wanted. But boy, the last 3 years, I think the balls and strike calls have changed. I think they're erratic. I think they're different from the first inning to the fifth inning. They're different high, they're different low, they're different paint in the black. To me, it's a big credibility issue in baseball. And we've also had an enormous turnover of veteran umpires, a la the Joe West of the world retiring. So I think baseball's got to find a way to get consistency again at home plate between what's a ball, what's a strike. And there is a human element. I do understand that. I also understand that's pretty wicked crap that Yu Darvish is throwing out there on the mound.
Yeah.
And that ball moves and that ball jumps and there's bite. And then you add into the equation, that catcher is framing pitchers. They've made this a science. And that catcher's bobbing and weaving and moving. So the umpire's job is really hard when you consider velocity and you consider bite and you consider the movement of the pitch. It's a tough job, but you got to do a better job. You got to fix it. And I don't know if the robo-ump is the solution, but right now baseball says, no, we're not going in that direction for at least one more year. But boy, what we're seeing, boy, bad.
Really bad. I mean, balls that are 4 or 5 inches outside the zone to the left or the right or up above. It's incredible. And also I remember when I was a kid, the strike zone was from your letters to your knees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not even that anymore. It's really from your belt to your knees. And they even get that wrong as well. So yeah, bring in the robo ump. I think it'll be a huge improvement.
I heard you screaming. I thought it was a dog howling, but it was you screaming at balls and strikes at a Padres game.
Oh, this just drives you nuts when you see it. I
can understand you. It's like a bad dog whistle. All right, let's take one more here before we put a lid on this.
Okay, let's talk about Ohtani. He's always a good guy to chat about. This is from David Moss, and he says, he had 3 points about Ohtani. He says, number one, Ohtani is under no obligation to speak with or answer any questions from prospective teams looking to trade for him. He already stated at the end of the season he was going to hit free agency no matter what, where he finishes the season. Number two, Angels sucks mostly due to poor pitching. Already never cared about the pitching. He likes the big bats. He has no issue rolling out big contracts for big hitters, even if he overpays for washed up hitters. And number three, he will get higher than $500 million for 10 years.
You said a mouthful. Angels are a mess. Part of me says, Jesus, owner screwed this thing up by interfering. Part of me says the owner spent a lot of money and it didn't quite pan out. You know, whether it's the horrors of giving that kind of money to a guy who had drug addiction like Josh Hamilton, or just the bad siege of black cloud luck that hangs over Anthony Rendon, who got a ton of money and can't stay on the field. I feel sorry for Mike Trout. He's such a warrior. Ohtani is such a great player. And I think Ohtani is one type of special person. For him to do what he does as a DH and as a pitcher, and the regimentation to be a major leaguer and do all the prep that he has to do at two positions and not burn out, and not run out of gas and not get hurt because you're beaten down, he's a phenomenal guy. From a media perspective, gee, I wish he could talk to us about free agency and his thoughts on it, but he refuses to do it. And CAA, his agency, has said, November 1, we're taking him free agent. So I accept that. I'd hate it for the Halo fans to lose him, but it's business. It's not personal. To quote The Godfather, it is business. It's going to wind up being business. I think the bigger question is the next 10 days, 2 weeks. Do the Angels trade him and take a plethora of young talent from somewhere else and rebuild this thing? That period, exclamation point. That's my theory.
Well, imagine if, he gets more than $500 million over 10 years. He gets, let's say, $600-700 million over 10 years. And you got all that money invested in him, and he blows out his arm. He needs Tommy John surgery. I mean, he's out for 2 years and he can't pitch and he can't hit. So that's a lot of eggs in one basket. I'll tell you what. But, these contracts keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger in Major League Baseball. You wonder if they're ever going to peak, and they'll say, we can't go beyond that. But the money, the revenue just keeps going up.
Well, the revenue keeps going up. There is obviously arguments about salary cap. Union won't sign that memo, I'll guarantee you. That's why I made my comment about a month ago that Artie Moreno should offer him a 5-year, $50 million per contract. And people just responded terribly. Why the hell would you do that? Well, dum-dum, the fatality rate of pitchers is really significant.
Yeah.
And he's already had one elbow surgery. So I'm offering him 5 at the state-of-the-art money today. And if he breaks down in that 5-year run, he's still going to be my DH or my outfielder. But I'm not. You're not signing him for 10 years thinking he's going to be a 10-year starting pitcher. I mean, the era of Glavine and Smoltz and Maddox, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I'll be intrigued to see how this turns out. My heart, my gut says that they have to trade him because there's been no conversation or no solution to any conversation that's gone on. And if the Angels are trying as hard as they can to hang in the wild card race, if the season falls apart, and it's going to fall apart because they just don't have enough pitching, they got so many injuries. No Mike Trout for 8 weeks, and Rendon is back on the injured list. I mean, it's like Ohtani against the world by himself. So I think he's going on the market. I think he's going to get mega money. And the question is, before we get to August 1st, should they trade him to restock the coffers at Angel Stadium?
Yeah, poor Artie Moreno, man. He's damned if he does, and he's damned if he doesn't. And he's tried. He's made some bad choices. He's made some good choices, and then players get hurt. There's injuries. Sadly, there's deaths. Maybe Artie Moreno may need to just sort of hit the reset button in his life and let someone else have a run with the Angels.
Sell the franchise. I concur with you. And maybe we should just indirectly say thanks to Ohtani. He took a lower price contract to come to Angel Stadium when he was coming out of Japan. I mean, the money was out there for him to go lots of places. He chose that place. So maybe instead of having a nervous breakdown here and spewing all types of venom that Ohtani and his agents, that's not good. Just say thanks, because he gave us 6 really fascinating years in Major League Baseball. Hey, listen, we hope you've enjoyed our live stream and our Thursday podcast.